the Clockmaker, and the Philosopher. Three tales of modern wisdom. In a narrow street, tucked between glass towers and traffic lights, there stood a shop that time seemed to have forgotten. The paint on its sign had faded, and the brass bell above the door jingled with a voice so old it sounded like memory itself. The sign read, Elias Horology, repairs, restorations, reflections. Most people never noticed it. They hurried past with glowing screens in their hands and earphones in their ears, too busy keeping up with the hours to think about what they were doing with them. But once in a while, someone lost their sense of direction or of meaning and found their way there. Part 1, The Clock That Wouldn't Tick. It was on such a gray Tuesday that Mira, a young woman in a blue coat, pushed open the door of Elias's shop. She was the kind of person the city breeds in abundance. Bright eyes, tired heart, forever late to something important. She held out a silver wristwatch. It stopped, she said. I need it fixed quickly. I've got meetings, classes, everything lined up to the minute. The old clockmaker looked up from his bench. His hands were brown with oil and years. He smiled the way sunlight might smile through dusty glass. My dear, he said, time doesn't like to be rushed. Sit a moment while I see what the watch has to say. Mira sighed, glancing at her phone. I really don't have... Elias chuckled softly. Then it's lucky you came to a man who does. He opened the back of the watch with a thin tool and peered inside. For a long while, he said nothing. Only the tiny ticking of dozens of clocks filled the air, each keeping its own patient rhythm. At last, he said, There's nothing broken here. The watch has simply stopped. That's what I said, Mira snapped. So can you make it start again? Elias set the watch down and leaned back. Perhaps. But first, a story Mira groaned inwardly. She hadn't come for stories. She came for function. Still, there was something in his tone that made her pause. There was once, Elias began, a clock in the town square that was famous throughout the city. It had ticked faithfully for 70 years, through storms, wars, parades, and politicians. People trusted it more than they trusted themselves. But one morning, it stopped. Men came with their tools. Women shook their heads. Children pointed and whispered. Everyone demanded it be fixed at once. The mayor called in a watchmaker, older even than I, who spent the day inspecting every gear. He found no damage, no rust, no crack, no flaw. So he asked the clock gently, Why have you stopped? And the clock answered, For this was a magical clock, as all true clocks are, because I am tired. For 70 years I have watched people hurry past me, always looking at my hands but never at their own. They blame me for the hours they waste, for the chances they miss. I am weary of counting their impatience. The watchmaker bowed his head and said, Then rest, my friend. The world will learn to move without you. But the town could not bear it. The people grew restless without knowing the exact time. They quarreled about when to eat, when to work, when to sleep. Finally, they gathered together and promised the clock something, that they would learn to use their hours wisely, not merely to fill them. The next morning, the clock began to tick again. Part 2. The taxi and the rain weeks passed, and autumn arrived like a sigh. Mira's days filled with deadlines and noise again, and though she often thought of the old clockmaker, she rarely found time to visit. One evening, she was caught in a downpour. The streets turned into mirrors, reflecting towers of light. She hailed a taxi, one of the few that still accepted passengers without apps and algorithms. The driver was a man in his 30s with kind eyes and a tired smile. His nameplate read, Jonas. "Rough night," he said as she climbed in, shaking off rain. "You're telling me," Mira muttered. "I've been delayed all day. Meetings canceled, trains late, now this storm." Jonas chuckled. "Delays aren't always bad. Tell that to my boss." He looked at her in the mirror. "Ever heard of Elias, the old clockmaker on Rose Street?" Mira blinked. "You know him? Used to drop by his shop between fares. He once told me a story about a traveler in a storm. Want to hear it?" Despite herself, Mira smiled. "I think I already know the kind of story he tells." Jonas nodded. "Then you know it'll pass the time better than complaining about traffic." And he began. "There was once a traveler," Jonas said, "who needed to reach the next city by dawn. He hired a carriage and urged the driver to go faster, faster, as the sky grew heavy with clouds. Soon the rain began, not gentle but wild, like the sky had decided to wash the earth clean. The road turned to mud, and the wheels sank deep. The traveler cursed the rain, cursed the driver, cursed the wasted time. Hours passed before they reached a village soaked to the bone. The traveler was furious. "Because of this storm," he shouted, "I'll never make it in time." The driver said nothing, just nodded toward the horizon. There, where the traveler had meant to go, a landslide had covered the road. Stones and trees lay across the path. No carriage could have passed. Anyone who tried would have been crushed. The traveler fell silent. The rain, he realized, had not delayed him. It had saved him. And he began. Jonas stopped at a red light and glanced back. "Elias told me that one when I was young and broke," he said. "I used to curse every slow night, every lost fare. Then I started to wonder if maybe the city's traffic sometimes keeps us from crashing into worse things." Mira gazed out the window. The rain had softened now, glistening like liquid light. She thought of all the times she had rushed, cursed, demanded more speed. Maybe some delays weren't accidents at all. By the time the taxi reached her apartment, the storm had stopped completely. Jonas handed her the receipt and said, "He's still in that shop, you know. Elias. You should visit him before time decides otherwise. She promised she would." Part 3. The Clockmaker's Farewell. Winter crept into the city quietly, frosting the windows of coffee shops and blurring the outlines of streetlights. Mira finally found her way back to Rose Street. The bell above the clockmaker's door jingled weakly. Inside, the air smelled of oil, metal, and old stories. But this time, someone else stood behind the counter, a young apprentice with uncertain hands. "Is Elias here?" Mira asked. The boy hesitated. "He's not well. He hasn't come to the shop in a week." Mira's chest tightened. "Do you know where he lives?" The boy nodded toward a small apartment above the shop. "He said if anyone came asking, they could visit." Mira climbed the narrow stairs. Each step creaked like a sigh. She knocked softly. "Come in," said the faintest voice. Elias lay in bed, wrapped in blankets, pale but smiling. Around him were clocks, hundreds of them, ticking softly, not in perfect unison, but in harmony, like a quiet choir. "Mira," he said, recognizing her instantly.